In today's video, I want to go over some huge Japanese RPGs that have essentially been confirmed to be in development for the PlayStation 4. Falcom is saying that the next Trails game will launch in Japan by September of 2020, and they're working on more PS4 remasters. We'll take a look at that. Also, speaking of remasters, re-releases, whatever the case may be, Capcom has used that as a big facilitator of their business this generation on Okami HD, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, and Mega Man 11. All of those title sales have each topped 1 million. And lastly, want to take a look at some information that has been revealed about Dying Light 2. Developer talked to Push Square, and a lot of information of that game has been revealed, so we'll talk that at the end of this video. And before we get into everything, I just want to remind you guys to make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon so you are always notified of uploads, and that definitely helps out the channel too, so we always appreciate that. First up, the next Trails game will launch in Japan by September of 2020, and Falcom is working on more PlayStation 4 remasters. Falcom seems to be a rather busy company these days between its development of brand new games in the Legend of Heroes franchise and its desire to make sure that its RPGs are brought to the West. The developers really kicked into high gear over the course of this console generation. Obviously, the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel has been a huge title this generation, huge in the relative sense of Japanese RPGs and what it was in the past, but Trails of Cold Steel has become a lot more popular than it once was in the past. Those games were hardly known, but now they're available on a litany of platforms. PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, you've got them on PC, PlayStation 4 now as well. They are available everywhere, and they are not slowing down anytime soon. During its latest financial briefing, Falcom revealed that the next Trails game is set to release in Japan by September of 2020. To be clear, this isn't a Trails of Cold Steel 5. Trails of Cold Steel 4 closed that portion of the story. However, the games do have narrative that is attached to one another. Like Trails of Cold Steel does have some elements from Trails in the Sky, so you will always see characters come in and out. You will see some narrative points hit again. However, this is probably going to start a brand new saga, and Trails of Cold Steel 4 launched in Japan last year, so this is probably going to be the start of a brand new saga, or maybe some sort of epilogue, but I would more so expect that this is going to be the start of something entirely new. Trails of Cold Steel 4 at this point isn't even out over here in the West, but hopefully at some point that does get translated. I imagine it will. Trails of Cold Steel 3 just dropped on PlayStation 4 late last month, and that game was received really, really well. The entirety of the series has been received really well. They are just very well done Japanese RPGs. They don't necessarily revolutionize in terms of battle system or visuals or anything like that. However, Trails of Cold Steel really stands out from a character development and narrative standpoint. I mean, you're talking about 4 games, each are 50 to 70 hours, maybe even longer than that. You have a lot of time to really flesh out the characters, really flesh out the world and story, and you're talking about an overarching narrative that goes back to a lot of other games as well. Trails of Cold Steel just has a very well done story, and when you compare that to games like, not to crap all over Square Enix, but like Final Fantasy 15, where it's so disconnected. Yes, Final Fantasy 15 to the naked eye seems a lot more appealing because of its visuals, because of its slick combat system, whatever the case may be, but if you want a compelling and engaging story that doesn't have a crap ton of plot holes, Trails of Cold Steel is absolutely head and shoulders the better game over Final Fantasy 15. When you take a look at it strictly from a narrative standpoint, dare I say, even when you look at a series like Kingdom Hearts, there are so many plot holes, so much disconnection from the games, and I'm not saying Trails of Cold Steel is absolutely perfect from a narrative standpoint. However, they are a lot stronger than the Square Enix outing, so just to make that clear, more Trails of games is definitely a good thing, and I want to see the series become more and more of a fixture to the JRPG offerings over here in the West. Right now, if you talk about JRPGs, you're usually thinking Final Fantasy, you're thinking Dragon Quest, you're thinking Kingdom Hearts, maybe you're thinking Tales of as well, but Trails of hasn't really broken through to becoming a more mainstream JRPG franchise. You really have to use the term mainstream as well, because Japanese RPGs are always just going to be so mainstream. I also forgot to mention Persona. That's of course one of the marquee Japanese RPG franchises now. Legend of Heroes definitely isn't at that level, but I do feel like if they continue to bring these games to the West, if they continue to deliver from a quality standpoint, if they continue to have compelling narratives and engaging stories, then yes, at some point they are just going to get more and more popular, and hopefully at some point we can mitigate the time between when these games are released over in Japan and when they come stateside, because at this point we're probably not going to get Trails of Cold Steel 4 until 2020, 2021, and you're talking about a 2 to 3 year wait time at that point, and that is a little bit of a bummer. Nonetheless, it's cool to see that the series is still kicking around. Alright, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about Capcom financials. They have updated its list of platinum titles, games that have sold over 1 million units, and some new appearances on the list include Monster Hunter World Iceborne, that has sold 2.8 million units, so that just released and immediately it has done very, very well. Okami HD has sold 1 million copies, that is really cool to see. Okami is a franchise that is relatively niche, not a lot of people checked it out back in the PlayStation 2 days, and unfortunately we never got an Okami 2. Hopefully with the success of Okami HD, someday we will get an Okami 2 because it looks like this has done rather well. Of course, it was released on a variety of different platforms, and 1 million copies over the course of, what, 2 years at this point? It's not like that's a blockbuster number. However, for a remaster of a game that was a PlayStation 2 outing, that definitely isn't a bad review score. Mega Man 11 has also sold 1 million copies. That's really cool to see. And then Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, that has also sold 1 million copies, so really cool to see that as well. Capcom has been killing it all generation. They have been one of the standout publishers of this generation, and really, when you go back to the beginning of the generation, when a lot of people thought a lot of Capcom's appeal had faded, then they come out, they release Monster Hunter World, they release Resident Evil 7, they released the Resident Evil 2 remake, they released Devil May Cry 5, Iceborne just came out, Okami HD, Mega Man 11, and now they've got a lot of other projects in the works. The Mega Man Zero Collection. Mega Man is one IP that's going to be sticking around, and that's great to see, going back to something like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where Mega Man wasn't even in the game, and that was such a crazy disappointment. Now it seems like Mega Man is going to be a big fixture to Capcom going forward, and it's great to see that that has turned around, especially after Mighty Number 9 didn't turn out to be all too great, and it didn't turn out to be that Mega Man replacement we were looking for. Good to see that the Blue Bomber himself is back in full force. And lastly, I do want to note that Push Square had an in-depth interview with Dying Light 2 lead game designer Timon Smekta at EGX 2019 to talk narrative choices and the PlayStation 5. A lot of information in that interview, and I do want to note a couple of things. I'll leave a link to the full interview in the description box below, but Push Square asked, in terms of these choices, obviously there will be a lot of them throughout the game. Do you think it will be possible to encounter a fail state if your relationships with the various factions go so poorly? The developer responded saying, quote, "It depends on the interpretation. We don't look at this in terms of good choices or bad choices. It's not a failure or a success. This is your story through the game, and no matter what choices you make, you will reach some kind of conclusion, and you will have to judge for yourself if you like that ending or not. There is a theme to the game, a meaning to the game, which is what's most important, thinking about yourself and being selfish, or thinking about people around you. And I think this is the main axis, the main context, the main lens through which you will look at whatever you end up with when you finish the game. So there aren't bad choices, there aren't failures, there are just choices that have logical consequences, and it's up to you to judge and decide by yourself if you like that or not." Here's a very interesting point in the interview. With the game coming out in spring of 2020 and post-launch content afterwards, that takes us into a realm where the PlayStation 5 launches late next year. It was said that Dying Light 2 will be a cross-generational game. Is that correct? The response was very interesting in that, quote, "We don't need to say that if it comes in spring because we won't have the next systems by then, but of course we have the next-gen consoles in our studio, and of course we have a plan for them, and I think that's the most I can say." So obviously, it looks like Dying Light 2 will ultimately be a cross-generational title, which I think makes a ton of sense. Dying Light 1 was one of those games that really was accentuated from a technical standpoint, and Dying Light 2, I feel like, is going to push the PlayStation 4 to the absolute limit, and even on the PlayStation 4, you might see some limitations versus what it's going to look like on a high-end PC. So if you can take the shackles off, if you can release a complete version with a lot of the DLC, an upgraded version, whatever the case may be, on the PlayStation 5, price that accordingly, it doesn't have to be a $60 game, well then I think it will do very, very well. The interview rounded out. Just to wrap up, spring 2020, we're still on course for that launch date, and it was responded with an absolutely last stage of production and polishing the game, so keep your fingers crossed. So it does look like we'll be getting this game sometime in the spring. I would imagine sometime in April, May, June. March already seems to be insanely packed, and right now it is getting kind of late in the game to announce a game for March, but you can still do that. It is still early November, so we'll see how things pan out, and I will keep you guys posted. That's gonna conclude this video. Again, it seems like some major PlayStation 4 JRPGs are in development, with the next games in the Trails series launching in Japan by September 2020, and Falcom working on more PlayStation 4 remasters. As far as what those remasters are, your guess is as good as mine, but that could also output some very, very interesting PS4 remasters. Okami HD, Mega Man 11, and Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection sales each top 1 million, and Dying Light 2 set to be a cross-generational game. It's gonna have free DLC, it's gonna have narrative choices, and a PlayStation 5 version is probably pretty likely. Who knows if it'll be a launch game, but something I'll definitely keep you guys posted about. That's gonna conclude this video. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.